Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Kathryn Andries.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Welcome to Spirit's Journey. We are coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio. We are also cast on simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. You can find us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live. We're here in the Heartland, holding the energy for spiritual truth and awareness. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Welcome, everyone. We have a fellow Ozark author with us today, Guy Needler, and I'm going to tell you a little about him and the fascinating discussion we are going to have today. So, like a lot of people, he started out on a traditional path. He actually was trained as a mechanical engineer, progressed to be a chartered electrical and electronics engineer. However, he had that little nudging that there was something bigger going on. And he was intrigued by other worlds and the worlds of spirit. And so he began investigating those. He spent the next 6 years of his life gaining his Reiki master and a 4-year commitment to learn energy and vibrational therapy techniques from a direct student of the Barbara Brennan School of Healing. His training and experience in energy-based therapies have resulted in him being a member of the Complementary Medical Association. In addition to healing abilities, his spiritual associations include being able to channel information from spirit, including constant contact with other entities within our multiverse and his higher self and guides. It is the channeling that has resulted in The History of God. These are his books, Beyond the Source books 1 and 2, Avoiding Karma, The Origin Speaks, the And Dialogues, The Curators, and Psycho-Spiritual Healing, which is yet to be published, is his latest work. So welcome, Guy.
Hi, guys. Good to talk to you again.
Hello, both. It's fantastic to be able to be part of your show. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for making time with us.
Well, let's start at the beginning, Guy. And a lot of people are asking, or always ask, who are we and how do we incarnate?
Well, it's a worldwide question, and one that is deeply seated within a lot of religions as well. Although the religions over the years have lost their particular focus on it, there's still an aspect of it there. Basically, we are smaller aspects of a larger aspect of sentience and energy that has been individualized from a much larger entity that I'm told to call the source entity, or we sometimes call God, and there's lots of other names for that particular entity as well. And as a result of that, our creation was really to support the objective of that entity, our source, our God, our creator, knowing itself better. It's a little bit like us as a cell of our body working on understanding the body better for us as the overall body, if that makes any sense.
Okay. That's a great analogy. I can imagine that, yes. And so what is the process of incarnation?
Well, the process of incarnation is actually quite complicated, as you can imagine. The whole of this is described in a book called The And Dialogues, by the way, but I'll try and summarize it in the best synopsis that I can. In essence, we, as sentience and energy, along with another group of entities who help us while we incarnate, help us to understand what we're going to do, what we want to achieve within this environment that is part of the source. There's something called the multiverse, which I'm sure we'll touch later, which is an area within the source which has been individualized for us to work with. It's a bit like us trying to understand that as a cell. It's like us trying to understand some part of the body, let's say the kidneys, or one of the kidneys, for instance. And the incarnation process is quite complicated because a long time ago, a vehicle to allow us as sentience and energy to experience the lowest frequencies within this multiversal environment, which are afforded to us in the physical universe, were created to basically allow us to experience it in the way we're supposed to experience it, by being part of it. And so the sentience and energy really connects to a series of energy templates that ultimately creates this physical body we call the human being, the human body. And of course, there's lots of other vehicles or human vehicles or other bodies. I like to call them vehicles because that sort of detaches them from being the human side, because there's lots of other form factors or body types or vehicle types that we use in different parts of the physical universe. But this body that we call the human body, being in the lowest of the frequencies, is probably one of the most complicated, because the sentience and energy has to come down through almost like a shrinking process, where it comes down a series of downward steps in frequency to allow it to connect to a bunch of energy templates, of which there are 7, but that it needs to come down through 3 higher templates to allow that connection to happen. And the sentience in the energy comes through something that's called the Hara line, which is almost like a hypodermically small pipe, but protects the connection between the sentience and energy that's projected from our higher self, or our oversoul, or Godhead, or true energetic self, as I'm told to call it, and position itself within this vehicle that allows interaction with this low frequency. And it goes through the first 3 frequencies, which are the 10th, 9th, and 8th frequency. Then it becomes part of the energy templates, which are the 7th down to the 1st. And each of these templates are energized by a group of energy receptors that we call the chakras. And so the energy in the sentience comes down through this Hara line, connects with this vehicle, this body, joins it at a place called the Tantien, and then the sentience and the energy then separates out. The energy then goes into a place that's called the core star, and the sentience goes to a place which is called the soul seat, which is just behind the heart chakra area. So the core star is sort of in a similar place to the origin of the solar chakra, but in towards the center of the body, similar to the Tantien, and the soul seat. Some of these words are Barbara Brennan terminology, by the way. And the soul seat is where the sentience lives, and so the sentience exists behind the heart. The energy that animates the body lives in the soul seat, and the connection between the two is at the Tantien. and then basically we just experience, learn, and evolve in this body, which has a definitive existence period based upon how we treat it and how we look after it, or how the environment affects it, for instance, and how we think, behave, and act, because that can also cause energetic dysfunctions, which can create a disease as well. And we experience the earth and those individuals who are also experiencing it in every way we can do. So all of the sociological things we experience are also part of being here. How we work with those other individuals, and that's sociological environment is up to us. Is how we grow, and we also have to create different things to exist within it, and educate ourselves, and create the opportunities for other vehicles to be created through procreation and all these different things. It's quite a big story, but that's I feel that's about as close as I can get to it in terms of a synopsis.
And so, Guy, I had a question about that. So, a lot of people wonder, well, why was I born in a healthy body and in a, pretty nice area of the world, or I could have been born, poor in a deformed body, in a pretty horrible place in the world. So how do we understand the different bodies and situations that we incarnate into?
Well, we have something called a life plan, and this is quite a well-known concept with a lot of spiritual individuals, and a lot of theory and conjecture and real knowledge surrounding what the life plan is. But in my understanding, it's simply a series of goals that we want to achieve while we're here. Bearing in mind that being here is a very short period. It's not even a blink of the eye in terms of how long we've been in existence in our individualized state. When the source individualized us from its own sort of massive body of sentience, and that life plan with those goals is augmented by us having individualized free will. So the goals, the points of achieving certain things, experiencing certain things, are there, but how we achieve those goals is up to us. It's a little bit like knowing that we've got to go to Seattle. But how we get there is up to us. We can fly there, we can walk there, we can hitchhike there, we can drive there, we can ride a motorbike there, catch a train there, we can catch a bus there. All of these different ways in which we can go from A to B is our free will. The objective is to experience going to Seattle and maybe staying there for a bit, and that's the goal of the life plan. And part of that is the choice of the vehicle that we use. Sometimes we don't always get the best choice because there's an awful lot of aspects. We sometimes call them souls that are queuing up to experience, learn, and evolve here, because the Earth is the only environment within the whole of the multiverse right now that's got fully individualized free will. There's various different forms of collective will and collective or associated free will, but nothing that is totally independent free will. And so we choose the environment which we want to incarnate into based upon the objectives that we want to experience, the goals we want to experience as part of our life plan. And that includes things like how long we want the vehicle to last for, how fit it needs to be to do it, the socio-logical impact of us being in a certain family, whether we want to experience certain family types, whether we want to experience certain levels of affluence, certain environments. So it's a big, complicated list that we work with that allows us to be incarnate, experience that life plan, and achieve. I'm going to say a certain level of success, because there is no such thing as success. It's just experience at the end of the day. But it's giving us the opportunity to experience what we wanted to experience in the life plan in the most effective and robust way we can do.
So you mentioned, the 7 energy templates. It's really interesting because in my early days studying metaphysics, we learned about 7 levels of consciousness. The conscious mind, physical body working together would be the lowest level, like what you're describing, and then there's more levels up there, and each of those 7 levels working with the chakras. So it's interesting the different similarities between these many different disciplines. And one of the things that I really am excited about, because my background's in physics and biology, but a lot of the studies in quantum mechanics, as well as some of these new theories that are trying to create a unification of the different theories in physics, like string theory, for example, are talking about multiple dimensions within our universe. And so that leads to this idea of the multiverse. And you see this even in fiction right now, like on Netflix, the Flash universe has a multiverse with all these different versions of Earth and different things like that. So can you describe for us a little bit about the multiverse?
Well, the structure of the multiverse is based upon the structure of our creator, our source. It's a bit like the source has 4 levels of structure that's been associated with its sentience, because it was also individualized from a much larger being that I'm told to call the origin, but the Hindus call it the absolute, or that which is beyond God. So my delight when I found this really old book, which was over 100 years old, by an old gentleman called Yogi Ramachakara, who was based in Chicago, was fundamental in terms of my being able to realize that what I was picking up was reasonable and had a validity as well. And when you start to see scientists link into it and start to work their way through theoretical physics to understand the multiverse, it starts to link into there as well. And they're starting to understand that there is a multiverse and there's parallel versions as well. Because there's in my understanding, there's a static structure. That static structure has, from our perspective, has 3 levels. It has frequency, it has subdimensional components, and it has full dimensions. Now, traditionally, scientists have said that we live in a 3-dimensional environment, but my understanding is that dimensions are much higher pieces of structure. What we exist within is a frequential environment that is part of a dimensional environment. And so my current understanding is that there's 2 ways of describing the multiverse. There's a linear way that we can understand as human beings, as incarnate human beings, that is. And two, there's the real way, which is it's totally totally amorphous, and it is, everything exists within itself and within each other, within and without each other, which is what it really is. But I'll describe the linear way, because that's a good starting point.
All right.
The multiverse is created through 12 full dimensions that are part of the structure of the source, and obviously that's segmented away. So it's like us allowing our liver to be used as an area for experience, learning, evolving for ourselves, for example. That multiverse, that structure of the multiverse, by and large, works exactly the same way, apart from the first full dimension, because that works with the lowest of the frequencies. So I'll deal with that last. So the 11th full dimension to the 12th full dimension, they all behave the same way. Each of them splits out into 3 subdimensional components, and each of those subdimensional components further splits out into 12 frequency bands or frequency levels, or sub-levels, whichever you want to call them. And each of those frequency bands or frequency levels has the capability of, and does, support a self-contained, simultaneously created universal environment in its own right. Now, this is static structure. It's not parallel structures. That comes with something else later. That comes with us making decisions and other individuals collectively working together to want to sustain a certain state of reality or condition. That's something else. So we've got basically this 11 times 3 times 12, which is 396 frequency levels or frequency bands. And this is not quite what we consider frequency to be, so it's a much different level of understanding what frequency is. And therefore 396 universes as well. But the first full dimension is unique because it holds all the lowest frequencies from a linear perspective. So although it splits out into 3 universes, 3 subdimensions, those group of 3 subdimensions collapse back into a composite subdimension because they're affected by being part of low frequencies. And so that only allows 12 frequencies to be created. And all those 12 frequencies they're so low that they're all required together to create a universe. So we have a rather unique situation here where we've got a whole dimension that's used to create one universe. And that universe has got 12 frequencies to create it because they're all so low, because they don't have the resolution, so to speak. So we've got a universe occupying a whole dimension, and a dimension that's only got 12 frequencies and one universe associated with it. So if we add up all the frequencies, we get 408 frequencies, but only 397 universes. And this universe, this multiverse, is what we exist within. What I'm told to call our true energetic selves. Dolores called it the oversoul. The Hindus call it the Godhead. We can also call it the higher self if you want to. Exists within this multiverse and moves around it as a result of its own evolutionary progression. Whereas when we incarnate, we come into the lowest frequencies, because being in lower frequencies is very difficult for us. It's like removing like 1,000 senses. Coming down to our 5 physical senses is like being worse than being deaf, dumb, and blind. But existing here, interacting with others that are here in all of the different political, socio-political, socio-spiritual, economic, environmental ways, gives us the experience and learning and subsequent evolution that is beneficial to us by being here. And so being in a lower frequency not only is an evolutionary advantage to us, but it's also an evolutionary springboard. It's like being on a bungee rope. It takes us much further than we would have done if we'd have stayed in the higher frequencies and been disincarnated. So the multiversal environment that's the basic structure of it. And it's part of a much larger piece of structure, much larger piece of structure. But the structure itself tends to repeat itself in different ways, up to including groups of 12. But this multiverse exists within the first group of 3 substructures of the first group of 12, of which our creator is part of the first 4. If that's confused everybody, I apologize.
If anything, Guy, I think this is very comforting for a lot of people, because we get so caught up in the problems of the day and thinking this is all there is and why is life so difficult, and hearing that, yeah, this is the lowest of the low frequencies. And yeah, it's normal to kind of feel like, boy, life sucks a lot of the time, because this is obviously not our home. It is a lower frequency. And like you said, we've cut out all our senses. It's like, wow, take away all my beneficial senses, narrow them down to 5, put me in this environment. So it's no wonder that the world is in a state of chaos all the time to some degree. So do you believe, a lot of people will say, oh, one day we're going to have this wonderful earth where everything will be peaceful and get along, it'll be heaven on earth. Is that even possible in this frequency? I mean, are we missing the point that the point is not to make this fake world, so to speak, this glorious place? It's to learn our lessons and bounce off the trampoline into the other higher frequencies.
Well, there's all sorts to talk about. I mean, Dolores talked about a new earth, and we talk about the ascension and how we move forwards. But my understanding is that ascension and the new earth is all personal. It's all how we move together forwards as individual, and sometimes individual and collectively together. It's achievable, but it requires significant amount of personal work, to be honest. The objective of living in a karma-free way, because karma is basically an addiction to low-frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions, such as material wealth, status, lots of belongings, power over others. All of this creates a low-frequency thought process that makes us want to come back more here, for instance. But if we worked around that and we could navigate through our incarnate existence by being of service when required, dealing with the demands that we need to have to exist here, upholding a job as a good citizen, doing the best we can, knowing the best we can do is being of service to others in some way, then we can create this condition where we do move up the frequencies. Meditation is one of the primary methods of doing this, and lifting our frequencies up creates a condition where we start to be in contact with other entities of the next frequency level up. If you remember just a moment ago, I said that the physical universe is created through 12 frequencies. Well, the gross physical aspect of our environment and our bodies is in the first 3. So that means that there's another 9 frequency levels that are there in the physical universe that we're just not interacting with. And so ascension and utopia, so to speak, is to be able to incarnate but being as a higher frequency, because each time we go through a higher frequency level, we have a different level of functionality, so to speak. We're able to communicate with others much faster. We understand more about the environment, why we're incarnating, what we're doing, why people do certain things. And so we can start to exist in a condition where we're being of service to others, and we forgive and forget everything that happens as it's happening, so to speak. So when we do this, we move into a higher frequency. So Dolores talked about moving into the next earth, the new earth, and a lot of this was all tied into this 24th of the 12th of the 12th, 2012, which quite frankly was just a date that sounded good. Not that Dolores picked on that date, but I think a lot of spiritualists picked on that date because it was part of the Mayan calendar or something. But in real terms, the frequency level that allowed us to start to work in a higher frequency way, we'd achieved in the February that year. The thing is, we didn't see it, and we didn't see it because when we're evolving or when we're moving up the frequencies, we're ascending, we're doing it in a gradual way. So we get normalized to where we are. It's a bit like being in the way I describe it is it's a bit like if you're in a bath of water that's boiling hot, you put your foot in the boiling hot water and you jump out rather quickly. That's because you notice the difference. If, however, you get into the bath of water and it's room temperature, you don't notice the difference. If you open the hot water tap, you get hot water going into the bath, you start to gradually increase the temperature of the bath water, but you don't notice the increase because it's so slow. And this is what happens with Ascension. We're working with ourselves in a slow, repeatable, robust way, We move up the frequencies fast, slowly, not in this cliff edge way that is described as being the mass ascension. And so we start to move up and we start to increase our frequencies slowly and slowly and slowly. We get used to different functionalities that we've got. And as a result of that, we start to become that which is higher frequencies as a result of that. And we move into the next frequency level. And so we as moving from one frequency level to another frequency level, we would move from the old Earth to a new Earth. The new Earth is the old Earth plus the new Earth plus the higher frequency. And so there's a new Earth at the fourth frequency level, which can be classified as the lower astral levels. But those people who are still on the third frequency level, the gross physical, don't see those people who've ascended to the fourth frequency level because it's a higher frequency, it's outside of our visual range. But those on the fourth frequency level can see and can move down, should they wish to do so, once they understand how they can move back again, to the third level to interact with those.
Awesome, Guy. Well, we are coming up to the break here. So when we come back, we're going to pick up on talking about the new Earth, because I believe you've mentioned there's 9, and we're going to get into volunteers, quantum entanglement, and more.
Thank you very much. Let's go for it.
All right. We're at the bottom of the hour, so we're going to be going into a short break, and so we will be back in 3 minutes. This is Spirit's Journey on Truth Frequency Radio and Oneness Talk Radio. See you on the other side. Back from the break. If you were just joining us, this is Spirit's Journey with Patrick and Kathryn Andries. We are coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio, simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio, among others. We are here today with Guy Needler, talking about the new Earths, quantum mechanics, and much more. So welcome back to the second half, Guy. Looking forward to what we're talking about here. So where we left off, we were talking about the new Earth, and we've been hearing that come up from a lot of different sources. And so you have a little bit different take on it with the 9 new Earths. Can you get into a little bit about the 9 new Earths and what that means for us?
Yeah, well, basically the new Earth is our ascension from one frequency level to another frequency level. And the way Dolores described it was that there's 2 Earths, and we move from one to the other. And that actually is a very good summary, because that's what happens to certain people who work on themselves and become a higher frequency. When we become a higher frequency through things like meditation, being of service, not getting embroiled in things like gossip and materialistic wealth, not being attached to karmic things, thoughts, behaviors, and actions, we start to move up the frequencies. So we move from one level to another level. The third frequency level, which creates the gross physical, to the next frequency level, which we sometimes classify as the lower astral, which is the fourth frequency level. And so that would be like a new Earth, really, because it's the old Earth plus. And the plus bit is we start to be able to interact with other entities that are on the fourth frequency level. Sometimes they're incarnate, and they don't come down to the third level, but the lowest level is the fourth level. So we do have some other entities that visit the Earth, for instance, we call them aliens, but they're just simply other incarnated vehicles that come here and observe. And sometimes at that level, we can communicate with more robustness, more effectivity, with entities that aren't incarnate, but are using various different forms of energy transfer to enable them to communicate with us on that level. And also we have a higher frequency level of interaction with the greater reality as well. So things like telepathy is much more prevalent. The ability to understand and create things is much more prevalent. The ability to use our intuition is much more prevalent. So clairsentience, clairvoyance, clairaudience, etc., is more common. As we work in ourselves again, that possibility of going from the fourth to the fifth comes into a possibility. So Those who go to the first new Earth, the fourth frequency, will be able to interact with those in the fourth frequency and those in the third frequency, should they desire to do so. But they wouldn't be able to interact with those in the fifth frequency, the second new Earth, because they're a higher frequency. So you start to see that what frequency level that you're on and which particular new Earth you're on. The fifth is the second new Earth, the sixth frequency is the third new Earth, the seventh frequency is the fourth new Earth, etc., etc. We start to move up the frequencies associated with the physical universe, and those aspects of the Earth in this instance that are manifest on those different frequency levels as well. And so each time we work on ourselves, and this could take multiple lifetimes to get to these different levels, unless we are doing extremely well. But if we move from one level to another level, and then we work on ourselves really hard, and then move from one level to the next level, we start to move up to the next new Earth. So each frequency level within the physical universe is actually a different level of manifestation, a level of finitude significantly higher than where we are right now. So if you stand back from the new Earth, look at it as being the universe, what we see in the universe now is mostly blackness, nothingness, with the odd galaxy there. And obviously there's billions of galaxies, but the gaps in between are massive. When we go up to the fourth frequency level, which is where the first new Earth is, and we look at the universe through telescopes of that frequency level, we would see many more galaxies that start to come into existence, because their lowest frequency is the fourth frequency. If we went up to the fifth frequency and up to a telescope again, we'd see much more content within the physical universe. When we get to the 12th frequency, which would be the ninth new Earth, we would see that the whole universe is full, with no gaps. So the universe is full because it's full of environments that we can incarnate into at various different frequency levels and experience, learn, and evolve. And each of these different levels is there and has different levels of functionality associated with it, in terms of our ability to incarnate, the grossness or lack of grossness of the body that we incarnate into, and the ability to experience, learn, and evolve, and on top of that, remember where we came from in a robust way also exists as well. So the different new Earths are basically different ascension levels, different frequency levels that we can ascend into whilst we're incarnate, and experience the different resolution levels or frequency levels associated with the universe that are manifest on the Earth. The Earth is, along with the rest of the universe at this level, is pan-frequential. That means it exists on all the levels associated with the first full dimension. So those 12 frequency levels are represented on the Earth. So every time we move up a frequency level, we go to another new Earth. And the higher we go, the more we understand who and what we are, because we've got more connectivity. It's a bit like being able to communicate with ourselves back in the 1950s, for instance, versus where we are now. It's that big a difference.
And so, Guy, it's not just a choice to say, oh, well, I would like to incarnate in, this higher frequency. Is that based upon what we have done with our lifetime, our level of understanding, and so forth, that then places us in the correct frequency that resonates with where we are at in our spiritual development?
Well, there's two answers to that, Kathryn. The first one is we can choose which frequency we incarnate into within the rest of the physical universe, and clearly the location and the form factor or body type associated with that environment or location or frequency we want to incarnate into. But on the Earth, it's very much a case of our evolutionary level, because the Earth is it's the only place within the whole of the multiverse that's got the capability of having individualized free will at such a low frequency. So the location that we would incarnate into would be a direct product of our progression, our evolutionary progression on Earth. So we can move into different frequency levels and incarnate into the 10th frequency level in one particular location, in one particular galaxy, within some part of the universe in one life, and we can go into the 8th in another life, the 8th frequency in another life in another location, or we can go into the 5th frequency in another life in another incarnation in another galaxy within the physical universe. But when we come to Earth, because it is so difficult to be here, the amount of freedom we've got is so profound. We're only allowed to move up, or we can only incarnate into the vehicle types and the frequencies associated with our evolution progression.
So can we move in both directions then? Because we're talking about ascending from one level of frequency to another within these different new Earths. But if, for example, somebody starts becoming trapped in some of these things that we're talking about, being addicted to low frequency thoughts and things like that, can people actually descend as well as ascend?
Yes, and right now, I mean, back just before 2012, the population of the Earth was doing really well. We were moving up. We were getting closer and closer to this jump where quite a lot of individuals would go from the 3rd frequency level, the gross physical, and start to be able to communicate with and operate in the 4th frequency. That would have been this ascension, this jump into the new Earth, so to speak. But because we've got complacent, and that's collectively complacent, we don't need to look at ourselves anymore. We've got it. We've made it. We never make it. We have to. It's always work in progress. But because we got complacent, we started to slip down the frequencies because we stopped meditating every day. We stopped considering others every day. We started to think that dropping the sweet wrapper out of the car window was acceptable. And, all of these different things have happened that mean that people who were previously on the verge of being spiritual have gone back into being very immersed in their incarnations, and people who are spiritual have noticed that they're also slipping backwards as well. Things that they wouldn't normally accept or feel or think or behave or act as being acceptable is now becoming acceptable. And you can see across the world the vast turmoil that's happening, where things are being considered as being acceptable that previously wouldn't be acceptable at all. And that results in a level of sort of chaos and uncontrollability, even down to the individuals that we place in power to govern us. And so, yes, we can move backwards. We would it's very unlikely we'd move down a whole level, but within the sort of sub-levels within a level, like going from the 3rd level to the 4th level, if we're like at, for example, level 3.5, where we're starting to become more connected, we can channel information, for instance, we can heal people. We want to heal people. If we start to drop down to about level 3.3, we start to think, well, do I need to heal people? Let them heal themselves. That's the sort of thought process that happens. We start to get complacent. We start to get, it's somebody else's problem. That's okay. Somebody else will sort that out. And you can start to see it around the world. I mean, for example, the number of individuals in India who throw litter on the ground because they believe it's somebody else's, it perpetuates somebody else's job. Well, that's a really bad way to think about it, because they've got a massive plastic problem over there. Well, we have as well. We just don't see it, but they see it, and it is very much a case of we need to continue to work on ourselves, meditate, think. Give ourselves 10 seconds to think and react to individuals and how they interact with us, to make sure that we're interacting with each other in an optimal way, which is ensuring that our evolution is maintained rather than is dropping off the table, so to speak. So yeah, we can go backwards.
So is there some kind of a force that is causing this mass complacency that is sweeping the globe currently, or is there actually sort of an agenda, maybe, that there are possibly a group of individuals that maybe they're more invested in kind of exploiting the resources of the earth, and they're kind of working maybe not in concert with each other directly, but they all have kind of a similar agenda where, they just really want to, exploit people's labor for their own gain and different things like that. And maybe collectively is that kind of pulling the masses, into this complacency that you're describing.
Yes, I mean, the whole point of the physical universe is that it gives us the opportunity to experience duality, and that, in a very black and white condition, that can be good and bad. Although there's no such thing as good and bad, there's just choice. And there is an aspect of existence on the planet where there are those who, even if they exist and they operate in a higher frequency, provide the opportunity for us to decide which way we're going to go. And that can be such as you're better off being selfish and looking after yourself than you are giving up some of your time and some of your resources and some of your hard-earned money to help others who can't. Not just give them money, but help them to become more self-dependent. And so, there are institutions, individuals within those institutions that operate on very high levels that are, if you like, giving the opportunity to change the way we think, behave, and act, but in another direction, one which isn't particularly the ascending side, but more the descending side. And they have a role to play, because if we came to the physical, the gross physical, and we just experienced one side of existence, then that just gives us a very biased level of experience. It doesn't give us a balanced level of experience. It's a bit like if we experience warmth all the time, we don't understand what cold is. So we can't appreciate warmth until we experience cold. We can't experience affluence unless we've experienced abject poverty. We can't understand it. We can't understand a good relationship versus a very tortured relationship, for instance. So it's about, the whole thing is this. Yes, there is swings backwards and forwards between how these different bodies or groups of individuals on this very high level, these very high levels, give us the opportunity to follow them or follow another way. And it's all about us having the opportunity to experience this choice. Do we go the right way or the wrong way, so to speak? Go to the left or go to the right? And if we go to the left, do we eventually realize it's not the best way and go a different direction? So so there are bodies of individuals at very, very high levels that are affecting changes around the world, and we either accept them and work with them, or we reject them and move in a different way.
Well, and I do see today, Guy, there is obviously a huge growing population of kids, even adults, with autism, ADHD, Asperger's. So there's been different theories that, these are actually, really evolved people. Other research shows that I've done that a lot of these kids are damaged by vaccines, which has caused them to fall into autism. Is it their karma? What is going on with this emerging, highly, growing problem in the world, and what does it have to do with?
There's a couple of things happening. One of them is that certain individuals are here to help us, and they're here to try to create this higher baseline frequency of the Earth, so that the ups and downs, the peaks and troughs we experience, even though we are sort of ascending in general up the frequencies, aren't so severe. And so that they come into existence as almost very pure souls. They haven't experienced for a long time, for instance, or they've evolved beyond the need to incarnate. But when they come here, they've sort of incarnated with this level of innocence that means that they expect everybody to be loving to each other and to be of service to each other and to care for each other. But that doesn't happen. And on top of that, some of them are very connected. They've come into this incarnation with a high level of the sort of frequency surrounding them and their bodies, their vehicles, that allows them to be more connected. And so they have the capability of connecting to the greater reality in a much more robust way than the average immersed soul has. The problem is that when they are born, they're expecting a level of communication that they've got assigned to them. So when they grow up, they're expecting to have communication on, let's say, 12 different channels, whereas their parents can only give them that based upon the physical senses, which are the 5 senses. So there's 7 channels of communication there, which they're not experiencing. So they get very frustrated at that. So the only way to sort of calm them down is to put them into the same room with other children or other adults of the same type. And then they interact with each other much better, because there's a lot of energetic communication happening that we don't see, and they probably don't even recognize in the background, and then they feel a level of communion, and then they can start to work together. But in essence, these people they're not so concerned about, on a fundamental level, that also includes Down syndrome individuals as well, by the way. They're not so concerned about individual gain, being selfish, what's in it for them. They don't have that agenda. They just want to be loved and be part of a community which loves them. And so when they don't get that feedback, they get frustrated. And so really what we're experiencing as incarnate human beings who don't have their level of communicative ability is that they are being obstructive, or being overly adolescent, so to speak, because we don't understand that they're trying to communicate on a high level and they're getting nothing back, so they're getting frustrated because we haven't got that level of connectivity or that level of being able to sense or see or experience other things that are around us. So a lot of them can tune into frequencies that are a couple of 3 or 4 levels above where we are now and communicate with other entities. But because their parents can't do that, when they tell their parents what they're doing, their parents will deride them, saying, "Don't be so stupid," or they'll sort of work with them a little bit, but they will know that their parents don't believe them because their parents aren't experiencing it. So what they don't experience from a physical perspective doesn't exist. So it'll becoming a psychological or a psychophysical problem that sometimes can be classified as being chemically based in the brain, or sometimes can be classified as being the result of exposure to certain medicines that has caused imbalances. But in real terms, some of the medicines that are being used to control them are actually causing the problem in the first place. So and from our perspective, if we give somebody who's got schizophrenia or something a drug, yes, it brings them down to our frequency level, and they will behave like we do. So they will no longer speak to other entities. They will no longer be speaking to somebody else in the room or saying there's somebody else in the room, because their frequencies are dragged down by the drugs. So their own functionality is being squashed because the drugs are creating a disharmony which drags them down the frequencies and puts them in our space, basically. And so this is what's going on. ADHD, psychosis, bipolarism, schizophrenia, is a very misunderstood, I'm not going to say science, it's condition, because we're trying to explain things in a physical sense that's happening in an energetic level.
So that is interesting, because that's one thing that I've thought about too. I haven't done a lot of research on it, but that some of the description of what people who are schizophrenic are experiencing with hallucinations and things like that seem to be very similar to different mystical experiences where people have had visions, and sometimes experiences people have during meditation and things like that, except that they're just having that in a waking state where they aren't really in control of creating the experience, like if you go into a meditation and have a vision or something like that. So how, if the medication is not the answer, because that's really dragging them down and really kind of taking them out of this experience that they have chosen to create based on what we're talking about, that they created a life plan, so they knew that their body and their life would have these altered experiences compared to what most people are experiencing. How can we help these people really interact in the world in terms of, the things that we all need to do? We need to hold down a job so that we can earn money, so that we can provide for our housing and our food and our basic needs and things like that. Some of these people get to the point where they just cannot even really function in society in a way to be able to take care of themselves. And so without the medication, like, how can they be able to survive in our current culture and society and things like that, while at the same time maintaining and respecting this interconnection that they've created?
They can't really. It's very difficult. It's because we're expecting them to change, and actually it's us that should change. So we've got this minute percentage of individuals, and if you notice, it's growing worldwide. The number of individuals who are being classified with ADHD, psychosis of some sort, schizophrenia, bipolarism, there's even an increase in Down syndrome individuals, and that's because that's the antidote to this completely self-centered, immersed, incarnate state that we're having. So they don't need to change. They can't change. We will have to change. And this the only way we can help them is by I'm going to say create colonies where they can work together and where we can observe and learn from them. And that's going to take a massive, shift in thought process for us to realize that we're the people who are blind and they're the people who've got sight. And right now, the world population doesn't have enough individuals who are expansive enough to be able to see this and work in that way, because it's going to need a massive change in world thought process, right down to the way we work right now, which is completely unacceptable from a supposed civilized world, because we've got vast levels of opulence and vast levels of abject poverty. And it's only when we start to realize that we should be working towards creating a condition where we can all work in the same way, all at the same level of economic structure, same level of education, where we're all working for the benefit of the whole, and working to maintain the environment, whilst also trying to progress ourselves, that we'll start to see that these individuals have a massive role to play. They have the capability of teaching us an awful lot, but we need to be receptive to what they're seeing, what they're saying, what they can pick up as well. It's a very difficult situation. We can't help them, but we need to help ourselves by looking at them and understanding them.
All right. Well, we are winding down here. We have just a couple minutes left. Can you share real quick how our listeners can get a hold of you if they want to follow up with you, and also your books?
Well, they can get hold of me through my website, which is www.beyondthesource.org. The email address is info@beyondthesource.org. The books are available on Amazon. They're available through the Ozark MT website as well, of course. The people can ask me questions. People do ask me questions. To be aware that I get a lot of questions, so that sometimes it's about a week or so before I respond, but I do try to respond when I can do. And basically, any question about God, the greater reality, who we are, how we incarnate, and what we exist in, and how we exist are acceptable questions. No question is too simple or too hard, because some of the questions that are really simple are really useful for me and others, and some of the questions that are hard are really useful for me and others as well.
All right. Well, Guy, thank you so much for coming on with us today. It's been a real pleasure and privilege for us to have you on. And I know that there's still a lot of questions I was interested in, like with my physics background, I'm interested in quantum entanglement and things like that. So I think we'll probably, if you're open to it, we'll have to have you back on again sometime down the road here.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll leave one sentence for the theoretical physicists. We don't need to entangle anything, because everything is everything else concurrently.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Guy.
Awesome. All right. And we love having you all with us too. So please connect with us on Facebook at Spirits Journey Radio, and be sure to like our page so that you can be part of our life and we can be part of yours. You can also study with us or get a reading with us at intuitiveschool.com. This has been Spirits Journey on Truth Frequency Radio, simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Among others, I'm Patrick.
I'm Kathryn. Have an awesome week. We'll catch you next Saturday.
See you on the other side.